This webinar is brought to you via the European Food Star Training Alliance and is held in cooperation with the ISEKI-Food Association and supported by Elsevier. Today's presenter will be Ana Maria Gomez, and I'm Christine Grabler. I will guide you through this afternoon and give you a short introduction. The introduction will be about using your control panel. An introduction about the FoodStar project will be given. This will be followed by the presentation. There will be a short section or a longer section for questions, which can be done written and orally, and the webinar will be followed by an evaluation. This is the control panel that you should see on the right-hand side of your screen. You have the possibility to post your questions in the text field below. I ask all attendees to do these questions in written form, because from experience we know that it's much easier to answer the question that come in written form and not do this orally, because audio quality is often poor. For seeing the whole presentation without the control panel, you can minimize the panel with this icon, with this arrow. This is for full screen size. By this tool, you can raise your hand, as I see that you have already tried to do. You can draw my attention to you by this raising your hand, and I will get back to you in a written chat and see if I can do something for you. This is the icon for the micro. It is now the case that all micros are muted. You can unmute your micro, but as I said before, for obvious reasons, it would be really helpful if you could keep your micros muted, because we are likely to get a lot of feedback and audio is then really disturbed. All micros are muted during the session for the attendees, and the session will be recorded and will be made available on the FoodStar website. So let me introduce the European Food Studies and Training Alliance, European FoodStar. It is an Erasmus Plus Knowledge Alliance project and started in January 2015. Gerhard Schleining is the coordinator of the project. He is located in Vienna at the University of Natural Resources. What is the vision of FoodStar? The knowledge that is transferred at universities through food studies and the knowledge that is present in the food industry on a practical level do have different approaches, do have different focuses. In universities, the focus is on research. Academics are looking into mechanisms and are doing research for publication. In food industry, the focus is on practical aspects. Solutions have to be quick. IPR is an important factor, and time constraints. So there is a gap in these two approaches, which FoodStar wants to close. By bringing together universities and food industries in long-term partnerships on European levels and offering services with a low thresholds, we are trying to bring practical and academic knowledge together. The consortium, who is involved in this work, consists of 7 universities, 3 food companies, and 11 multipliers and training providers that are located all over Europe. The universities involved are for example, the BOKU in Vienna, AgroParisTech in Massy, IPC in Coimbra, UCP in Porto, the University of Hohenheim in Germany, the University of Leeds in the UK, and the University of Teramo in Italy. Food companies involved are the Portugal-based Frulact, GB Foods from Spain, and as an associated partner we have Nestlé from Switzerland. Among the multipliers and training providers is on the first place Lebensmittelversuchsanstalt, LVA. I'm talking to you from LVA. I'm working here as a project manager. We are an institute for knowledge transfer and we are doing projects in product development and process development for food industries. And our fellow institutes in this consortium have quite a similar portfolios, just like Actia, Federalimentare, ANIA, FIAP, SEFT, and FIPA. And we have associated the University and Teachers Network IFA. And we are also proud to have the industry associated to the project through EFOST. SPES is an association for food industry associations, and Eroica is a student network. Foodstar does not only want to have a virtual presence, but also represents itself in physical hubs. These centers are located in Paris, Leeds, Vienna, Hohenheim, Porto, Barcelona, and Teramo. And we are trying to establish sustainable collaborations between industry and academia this way. We are open for suggestions for further webinars, and this is the email address you can reach the Foodstar Consortium. It's office@iseki-food.net. So this is now the moment that I can hand over to Ana Maria Gomez. She will do the lecture today. She is assistant professor of the Escola Superior de Biotecnologia da Universidade Católica Portuguesa. I hope this was the right pronunciation. She is located in Portugal. She holds a FD in biotechnology and is the assistant professor and senior researcher, and has done research for 25 years now and was involved in research on functional ingredients, on research on marine-derived byproducts and milk and dairy products, legumes and cereals. She is an experienced researcher, thus has published a lot already. Also 2 patents come from her, and she is doing a lot in academic teaching. Today she will talk to us about food design. And I may hand over the screen to you now, Anna. Are you ready? So the screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Christine, for the introduction. Good afternoon to everybody, and thank you for the opportunity for being here and talking to you about these new trends for design of food products. I hope to, when we come to the end, I hope that it has, or that it may be just sharing some ideas within this topic. So as far as the agenda for this afternoon, I was thinking of just going through food as a functional and sustainable resource, just speaking a little bit about the health trends and the food trends in order to then get into the design and what we should take into account in product development nowadays. So if we want to start from the beginning, I think we can very easily say that our health is partly dependent on the eating habits of our mothers before pregnancy. And so nowadays, when we're talking about nutrition and when we're talking about health, we have to look at the preconception stage. And thereafter, all phases are important in our lives. And when we do product development, we do want to add to this maximum, if we want to say so. So we want to be born well, of course. We want to live and age better. And so this is something that has come from many platforms, from the European Technology Platform inclusively. We want to add life to years. And how can we do that? That is the question that we have to pose ourselves, especially if we are within academia or within industry trying to do product development. How can we contribute to this current, or how can we overcome the current curve where, in fact, the quality of life does not actually follow the longevity curve? And what we really want is add quality to our life. So we want to prolong the benefit throughout our life span, let's say. Because, in fact, we do live more years, fortunately, given the scientific evolution and given all the knowledge and that has brought about very important discoveries. But in fact, when we look at curves like this one that was published by the British Nutrition Foundation, for example, this is just one example, where we do have the female and the male life expectancy quite high, but when we look at the healthy life expectancy, in fact, that does not follow. They do not overlap. And that is what we would like, in fact, things happen. And so how can we do that? We are on a constant battle within genetics, within nutrition, and within lifestyle. So we are facing, and in terms of undoubtedly, when we have and when we're talking nowadays about all these factors behind product development or behind food and behind the nature of food, we do have to take into account the health and nutrition aspects. They are without doubt on the front burner of trends, and they do contribute to the future of food product development efforts. So we are looking at susceptibility genes versus protective genes. We are looking at the pure nutrition in utero versus the good nutrition in utero. And there are many studies showing the importance of the nutrition during the pregnancy stage, because that is going to impact on the future healthy aspects of human beings. And then we have lifestyles. And here we do have a very important issue to take into account. And as time goes by, the pendulum does go towards the disease if we do not counteract and if we do not take into account all the important aspects. And by living more years, quality of life does not follow, and we have all these chronic diseases showing up, as you most surely are quite familiar with them. So how can we bring this on? In fact, these new foods, and this is not, as I was mentioning, health and nutrition is at the forefront of food product development. It's not something that has come from today. We have to go back in history, and we do have father of medicine saying that medicine, let food be thy medicine and thy medicine be food. We know that this is, everybody I think is very familiar with this phrase or with the statement, but in fact, never have we assisted or never have we had so many papers, so many opinion papers coming out as far as nutrition is concerned. But nutrition should be presently at the basis of our food product development. And we are talking about the macronutrients, we are talking about the micronutrients, we are talking about the balance between these two, we are talking about increasing partly some of these, the vitamins, the minerals, the good fats, the low carbs, and we are talking also about removing some of these. So the sugar, the simple sugars, the saturated fats, and even here, we have to take into account that we have to look at quality and not quantity, the sodium and whatever. So just very briefly, how does this evolution in nutrition stand by product development? Well, we do start off with a classical nutrition aspect at the beginning of the last century, where here product development was actually targeting prevention of deficiencies, of nutritional deficiencies. And when we reach the 70s and the 80s, we go into an optimum. Well, firstly, here where, of course, also given the development of lifestyles and given the development of agriculture and food safety and whatever, we have more offers, so we have more products on the market. Many of these are actually within the indulgence and in many cases offering unbalanced nutritional profiles. So very easily we come into this chronic disease moment, and so in the 70s and 80s, product development starts to, in a passive way, starts to target the prevention of disease, or the prevention of chronic illness. So we are starting to look at the balanced diets, and we are starting to look at the need to actually look into the nutritional profile and reformulate in order to meet with nutritional recommendations. From the beginning of the century, we have had a real revolution, and here we are looking at active nutrition. Here we want to look beyond the primary and the secondary function of food. When we talk about the primary function, we are talking about the meeting with the energy and with the and with the control functions that we associate with food, so meeting the nutritional requirements. When we look at the secondary function of food, we are looking at the organoleptic features. And now we are looking at food from an active point of view, so with a tertiary function, where here we are looking at a food that is adding value, a food that is contributing to health and well-being, and also eventually contributing to the prevention of or reducing the risk of disease. And so here we are also naturally talking about functional foods. And these functional foods either emerge from the incorporation of bioactive ingredients where dose and efficacy are crucial, or we can also look at the reformulation aspect. So that's where we also stand in food product development nowadays, where the reformulation is replacing that which is less good with something that is beneficial for a human being. And of course, here, as scientific and technological, as we face these advances from the scientific and the technological point of view in the field of health and nutrition, of course, we also have to think about the focus and the emerging aspects related with the nutrigenomics and the nutrigenetics. And here, the personalized nutrition also comes in. So the science of nutrigenomics and how this involves the application of the human genome to nutrition and personal health to actually provide individual dietary recommendations is without doubt quite promising in the near future, and can also be behind product development. Although here we really, because we are looking at tailor-made aspects, but research really has to delve a lot into this field in order for us to be safer in this aspect. So it's a very emerging aspect. Just looking at our world in the 21st century, what do we have to take into account when we design our food products? What we nowadays, and when we're looking at the Horizon 2030, quality and sustainability, health, nutrition are at the basis of, or should be at the basis of, what we put on the market. And we have this demographic transition. I'm sure you're all well aware of what we are facing as far as these aspects are concerned. We have the nutritional transition, and here the decrease in the consumption of healthy foods, the increase in the consumption of processed foods, we really have to counteract once again. And already a lot is being done, but this has to be constantly present within our product development stage. And the epidemiological transition. Naturally, we within the industrialized countries, we have less infectious diseases, but undoubtedly we are facing very high numbers as far as the non-transmissible chronic diseases are concerned. And here we have to look at important aspects. So from the cardiovascular point of view, we know, and I don't want to tire you with numbers, but it's just, these are some of the targets that we really have to continue to take into account, and they have to be behind the ongoing product development that industries put into practice. So from the epidemiological point of view, from the costs point of view, which is a very important aspect as far as if we want to help we in academia or working in close collaboration with industry, these are targets that we have to take into account. From the cardiovascular point of view, I think we all know very well that millions and millions of people die annually globally due to the cardiovascular disease. And in terms of estimates, the World Health Organization is facing something like 24 million people annually. As far as obesity, we know that obesity has grown into a major public health crisis over the last years. And we also know what are the health consequences of obesity. And we also know, besides contributing to heart disease, besides contributing to stroke, to several types of cancer, inclusively to the diabetes, which is also a real problem, we have costs and health expenditure which are really overwhelming for many of the countries, and the numbers are really astronomical. Some things like 500 billion are targeted for 2030 in terms of health expenditure. Diabetes as well, and diabetes here is also very worrying because we are facing a population younger and younger reaching this diagnosis. Osteoporosis is the cause of more than 9 million hip, wrist, and spinal fractures worldwide each year, and it's second only to cardiovascular disease as a global healthcare problem. And then there is an aspect that many times we overcome or we overlook, which is the dementia. And when we look at the demographics and we look at the elderly, we have to take this into account. And product development here can really make the difference. So we know that the prevalence of dementia roughly doubles every 5 years over the age of 65. And so from an estimated value of roughly something like 40 million people at the beginning of this decade, we now have something very similar to 66 million in 2030 and more than 115 million in 2050. These are the rather dark estimates for the next coming decades. And of course, we have the elderly. Although it's not a chronic disease, it's very nice to age, but we want to age, as we mentioned previously, well. So looking into the consumer trends and looking at the increased incidence of lifestyle disorders we already mentioned, what is the demand coming from the consumer? We really have a consumer which is much aware of what of this relationship also between food and health. So consumer starts to demand more and more, and most surely you're all familiar with the trends over the last couple of years. And consumer really wants to bring added value, or wants their food to have added value. So and also wants their food to have quality, also wants their food to be safe, also wants their food to be as clean label as possible. So these are all aspects that have to be taken into account when we are doing product development or when we are designing a food product to actually respond to these demands from the consumer. As we all know, consumer has to be at the center of our product development if we want to be success within the market. So based on the consumer demands, we are actually targeting the development, or we need to target the development of health, natural foods, functional if we actually are able to prove the biological activity associated therewith, and also as much as possible develop products that are free of synthetic additives. So try to replace these with natural alternatives. And the format, of course, here is also an issue because given the hectic lifestyles, given the changes in terms of family structure, in terms of psychological, cultural aspects, ethnical background, well, here undoubtedly the format, and naturally without losing out and without never forgetting the taste, the safety issues, and the price value that the consumer can get from, because naturally the consumer is ready to pay, and it's also consumers will put up with some of the products deficiencies for if they do recognize that there is a perceived benefit. But even so, when we look at food purchasing motivation studies, the balance between price and between organoleptic satisfaction is really there. So we want to satisfy the needs, we want to satisfy the psychological needs, we want to satisfy the physiological needs, right? So we want to satisfy the perceived health needs and wants of our consumers. So we can target at different levels. The mass market level, where here we try to correct for nutritional deficits. We can target the at-risk or the prevention level, let's say, where here we really want to help improve health status and prevent disease or minimize the onset of a chronic disease. And at the last level, we can see, or we can try to help within the treatment. So as an adjunct, of course, we are not going to replace pharmacological aspects, but we can, food can help minimize the negative aspects associated with disease. Okay, so what are the solutions? What can we do? How can we help? Well, here, if we want to have a food industry, and I think I have a 2020 horizon, but nowadays we are already looking at the 2030 horizon. For example, the European Technology Platform, Food for Life, has already put out a document within that horizon. It's really very important to be able to respond to consumer preferences and needs in a differentiated manner, and undoubtedly considering the cultural aspects. These have to be considered very, very well, especially within the global world, or within the global situation that we live in. The consumer needs to feel linked, and this is very transversal or very horizontal to many of the trends that come out over the last years. So the consumer needs to feel linked to this product development, and so we have to take into account the transparency, the confidence, and the honesty in product development. And we have to place our emphasis on health and sustainability. So by developing value-added products in place of the conventional, if we can call them that. We all know that the millennials are behind many of these driving trends, and they do very well. This is just taken from a report from our Portugal Foods, which is our food cluster here in Portugal, and they published this report, which is quite interesting. So we can see here, independently of looking at the younger, older, or the non-millennials, we do see consumers really wanting and wishing that food companies are transparent about the manufactured products, and they also are looking within the product development. They really want food to ensure health and nutritional status, or a healthy nutritional status, if we can put it that way. So, once again, as I mentioned, a consumer needs to be in the middle of this food design or food product development, and we really need to hold hands or take this. Christine was mentioning the project's objectives, the Food Star project objectives, and we really need to bring industry and science together. And of course, we have to, and especially when we are looking at added value, we have to work in close collaboration with the health professionals. And undoubtedly, the consumer is at the middle of our target. It's not what science wants, it's not what industry wants, it's not what health wants, it's what these three want together, and to meet consumer demands, consumers' interests, and consumers' well-being. I couldn't help putting this in, because I think as we are looking at nutritional health behind as driving forces for this new product development status, well, we can very quickly go through the European Union strategy for nutrition and health. And everything is here. Everything that industry has to take into account, that science has to validate so that industry can implement. So labeling, claims, scientific information, good education campaigns. We need to promote the consumption of healthy foods and promote the reformulation of foods to reduce the level of certain nutrients, as we mentioned previously, or improve the nutrient content of manufactured foods. Undoubtedly, the regulatory aspects cannot be overlooked. These are very, very important within today's product development. And of course, food and physical activity, or dietary habits and physical activity, should always come together. Well, these are the binding legal measures, which of course we have the regulation of food information and on nutrition and health claims, but then we also have voluntary measures, and that's where actually food industry can actually make the difference. Very, very quickly, just sharing the trends in food, nutrition, and health. Well, there are different ways of looking at the trends in 2017. Here, just pointing out 2 or 3, while the personalization, as we can see, is coming on. So here we have a really powerful growth potential for food and beverage companies actually, and connecting, for example, to the inflammation. And inflammation connects to the digestive wellness. Digestive wellness is indeed a very important beneficial platform that is nowadays within the target of many food product development, because given the advances in new technologies and given the new understanding of gut health and of the role the gut microbiota play in the prevention of dysbiosis and the onset of a general health status, digestive wellness is indeed quite important, and the consumers are very willing to try to achieve this digestive wellness. Plant-based, so alternatives to the dairy products are also on the rise for many reasons, either because, and we have this flexitarian aspect, or also given due to allergies or due to intolerance aspects. So this is where I would just like to deter these last 5-6 minutes of my talk. When we are doing product development and product design or food design nowadays, we no longer are looking just at the processing aspects. We are no longer just looking at the formulation aspects. We have to look beyond formulation and technology. We really have to look, and we really need to look at food product development from a multidisciplinary point of view. So it's not only the food science and technology that we have to account for. We have to look at the nutrition, and we have to look at the physiology. So undoubtedly, we are formulating, and within this formulation, as I mentioned previously, we might sacrifice just a little the sensory aspects for the consumer's benefits, but we have to take into account that the consumer is not yet willing to sacrifice organoleptic aspects fully. So the food acceptance undoubtedly is very important. The food safety, also very important. The convenience and the price, all factors that need to be taken into account if we want to be successful in the marketing or in the commercialization of our products. But we also have to look at the food matrix from the bioavailability point of view. If we have a nutrient, if we have a vitamin, if we have a mineral, if we have an omega-3, if we have a bioactive compound that we are incorporating in our food, if this is not bioaccessible, so if the structure of our food is hampering the reaching for our nutrient or for our bioactive compound so that it can be absorbed in the quantity required to meet with the physiological needs, then we don't have anything. Well, we do have a product, but we don't have a successful product reaching the objectives that we had stated initially. And if we go into the functional food aspect, then we have to go a little bit further. We have to look at the dose response. We have to guarantee within our target group that the efficacy has been achieved. So food product development nowadays and if we are at the added value point of view, is no longer just putting ingredients together, looking at the technological aspects and the organoleptic aspects, and having a successful, tasty product. We really have to look at food structure. And this really affects if we have larger or smaller particles, if we have the interaction between compounds. Of course, these are going to affect the bioavailability, well, initially the bioaccessibility, then the bioavailability, and in the long run, the physiological aspects. So, as I was mentioning, food product development today needs to look at this, or needs to have a multidisciplinary background, having food science, nutrition, and physiology coming together. Of course, we also have the toxicity aspects to take into account, and perhaps we can just go a little bit further. So when we are looking at technology, and what questions can we pose, or what questions should we answer when we are doing this product development? Well, first of all, and if we are looking at bioactives, or if we are looking at nutrients, because sometimes this is where also we might be mistaken, and the matrix is really a very important aspect to account for right from the beginning. Sometimes, and especially when we are doing functional food development, or when we are looking at functional ingredients, we tend to look at, well, first from the bioprospecting point of view, identify new bioactive compounds. Once these have been identified, we try to validate their biological activity within in vitro models and then in vivo models, and that is what we are worried with to reach the claim. But then the greatest issue does not remain with the ingredient, it's with the matrix. Because I can, in actual fact, have a very interesting functional ingredient and place it in a matrix where, first of all, the consumer does not see the link between ingredient and matrix. For example, if I am placing a fish oil within a dairy product, might not be very acceptable for the consumer. And secondly, this matrix might contribute, because of the technology that is being used or because of the other ingredients that are present, this matrix might contribute to an inactivation of my functional ingredient. So I will never be able to target the biological activity that I started off with. So what questions should I answer? Which technology best prevents bioactive degradation or nutrient degradation? It has to be reliable. It has to be traceable. It has to be a standardized production system. It has to give me a high yield, because, of course, I'm always taking into account the aspects as far as price is concerned. And then the minimization of the nutrient ingredient degradation. Technology has to mitigate, or it has to minimize the risk of this degradation of the nutrient or of the functional ingredient. When I come to the matrix, well, what is the question that I have to ask? How to deliver bioactive ingredients to the consumer? What are the best adapted raw materials to the matrix in which I want to incorporate them? The state-of-the-art formulation technology and expertise, this has to be considered. Tailor-made solutions, as mentioned previously. And I really have to have matrices that will mitigate the nutrient interactions and that will maintain good sensory quality. Then, this is not enough. I have to go into the bioavailability questions. So what is the efficacy of absorption of the bioactive in this particular matrix? What are the synergistic interactions that I can have between bioactives and food components? Or what are the antagonistic interactions that will minimize my bioavailability? So, of course, synergistic interactions are very welcome, because this is going to contribute to reduction of the food formulation costs, because I will need less bioactive ingredients. And finally, but not less important, how does this bionomial bioactive matrix comply with the legal requirements if I am to place a claim, be it a nutritional claim or be it a health claim? Do I, or am I able to generate consistent, valid scientific evidence for the claimed biological effect? And very important, and that is why I have at the end or at the bottom of my slide, the 4 stages that we have to account for when we are doing product development. And we cannot just stay on the production or on the storage. We have to go through preparation and consumption, because we have to monitor the formation of eventually toxic byproducts during the shelf life consequence of the fortification, the enrichment, or the reformulation. For example, I might have lipid oxidation. I'm working with omega-3s. I'm incorporating them in a food. I might have lipid oxidation. And this might eventually even be quite negative for my consumer. For example, if I have lipid oxidation within an infant formula, at that stage in life, we still do not have all our physiological capacity to respond to these oxidized products. So this is really very important to account for. And all of these factors need to be taken into account when we are doing food design or food product development. So just to round off, just leave you some take-home messages. It is really very important to know what is your consumer, with whom are you working with, what is their knowledge in this link between nutrition and health. Never, never forget the organoleptic characteristics, and they have to go hand in hand with the beneficial aspects. Choose your technologies very well, and formulation, reformulation issues have to really be considered also with great care, taking into account what you want to develop, who you want to target, what is your bioactive compound, what is the matrix in which you might need to use a protective technology, for example. You might need to include a nutrient which will help in the bioavailability issues. Once again, omega-3s are much more bioavailable within a fat product, or within a product that has fat to actually be used as a vector for these omega-3s, than putting omega-3s in a low-fat product. So this ingredient vector relationship, this binomial, really has to have very careful selection. Always consider food policies, always consider what are the laws you have to take into account when you're doing product development. Don't leave this for the end, because then that might increase the costs associated with product development. Adequate communication of benefits and risks, responsible, transparent development. Just to end off, and nowadays, within this new era that we are facing of health and nutrition, and with all these prerequisites that we have to account for, it's not the strongest species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the ones most responsive to change. This we owe to Charles Darwin. So thank you so much for your attention. And I hope that you had a nice half an hour listening to just some ideas.
Thank you very much, Anna. This was really a very comprehensive overview about how to do products also with a health claim. I may add that LVA is involved in an European project called Pathway 27, where we are doing exactly this. We are developing products with health claim and looking at matrix effects, looking at the contents of the bioactive. Yes, it's a very, very complex issue there, and we are trying to get all our information that we collect during the studies into guidelines in order to make this information available to others who are trying to do product development with a health claim. And the question of acceptance, will consumer accept a dairy product with fish oil? I can definitely say no, they won't. And it's the same for, yes, purple products that have anthocyanin, or or when the texture is not acceptable because of too much fiber in it. So there are a lot of factors that you have to pay attention to when you do a food product development in this sector.
Exactly. Thank you, Christine, and I wish you all success with your project.
Yeah, thank you very much. We will need it. So I may invite attendees to send me your questions if there are any. I can already say thank you to Kelly Gibson for her input. She notified me, she drew my attention to some mistakes we had in the introductory presentation. So if there are any questions, Mrs. Gomez will be there for you to answer them. And okay, I have a question from Janet Bakalars. Sorry if I pronounce it wrongly. So, is there already a link proven between nutrition and genetics through human studies, in particular in regards of obesity? I heard of a study with mice indicating that already the diet of the grandmother generation had an influence on the grandchildren generation. Anna, could you answer this question? I will forward it to you too. You should be able to read it in your chat window. So the
Okay.
question is about, is there a link between nutrition and genetics?
And as far as obesity is concerned, right?
Obesity,
Yes, well, thank you so much for the question. Well, of course, there is still a lot to discover. Many of the studies that are published in literature are related with mice. But in fact, it is very true. Studies like the one mentioned by the colleague, and from the it has been shown that there is an influence within. So how information is passed on from generation to generation, and how this can actually contribute or increase the risk of obesity in this case. So naturally, we are still just at the beginning of this relationship. Much has to still be done, but there are studies already in the literature showing this promising relationship between the impact. Well, and as far as the dietary habits of the mother influencing the health status of the newborn, and then in the child development stage, there have been very interesting studies being performed, even at the cardiovascular risk point of view, obesity, mainly these two, at least the ones that I'm more familiar with. So I'm not familiar with everything that is in literature, so sorry if I cannot contribute more, but there are some very good evidences within animal studies showing this relationship indeed.
Yes, it's a very interesting question, very complex issue. During the Pathway project, we are also doing this connection, trying to investigate how genetic basics are influencing the possibility to digest. It's also a question of how you can take in nutrition. Yes, a very complex thing.
A very, very, very complex issue indeed. And research is still very at the beginning, but of course, thanks to all the new technologies that we have available, we are now able to look at genes from a different perspective, and look at these relationships as well. So hopefully, within a short time framework, we will be able to have more robust information considering this relationship.
I have another question from Omid Niknam. He says, thank you for your nice presentation. And the question is, could you please tell me how we can assess a new product? For example, some specific products like whey protein for athletes from the marketing aspect, or assessment of whey protein products for market aspects. Do you have an input for this question, Anna?
Well, thank you for the question. I'm not quite sure whether I understood exactly what the colleague is asking. So,
as assessment of a new product, yeah, that's really a bit hard to say.
Like whey protein for athletes from the marketing aspect. from the marketing aspect, well, of course, from the marketing aspect, it all depends on the company, and all depends on the communication issues, and it all depends on the honesty and the transparency. Well, of course, whey protein is very important. We all know that, and whey protein is indeed a very interesting ingredient with a very interesting nutritional profile. And it indeed has many functional attributes associated. From the marketing aspects, well, I think the easiest way is to look into scientific literature and to validate whatever the marketing communication is being done. So you should have access to the type of whey protein that you are being consumed, whether it is a whey protein isolate or whether it is a whey protein concentrate. So there you will have an idea of how much whey protein indeed you actually have in your product. And then, so here look at the nutritional information. And then based on that, look into literature, into scientific literature, to validate whatever information is being given by the marketeer. I'm not sure whether I'm answering correctly the question. I'm not sure whether this is exactly what our colleague wanted.
Maybe he can get, I don't know if he or she, sorry, if you could give me some feedback through the text field, I could maybe define this in more detail. In the meantime, I have another question from Kristina Kukurova. What is your opinion on blood type diet? So it's about the nutrition regimes that are drawn up according to the blood type, the blood group that an individual has.
I do not have enough information. I'm sorry, Christine, but I don't have enough information to be able to respond to that, because I would be replying not on scientific basis. So I have to pass. I really am sorry.
Yeah. Yes, sorry, Mrs. Kukurova. Thank you for a question, but this is out of scope, I think so, yes.
Yes.
Then Alice Rubran is asking, what about sustainability when developing new products?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Alice. This is a really very important issue nowadays. Of course, sustainability has to be completely present. If we want to be able to be here and to have a working planet in the next coming decades. Yes, sustainability issues are very important to take into account. It's not just enough to go through and to identify an interesting ingredient or to have or to work with interesting bioactive compounds. First of all, especially within that field, with the bioprospecting, we have to consider that we are actually not increasing production costs, but actually decreasing production costs, because we might, from the research point of view, we might identify very interesting bioactive compounds. But if these are not sustainable in their production, first of all, and if we don't have a sustainable availability thereof, and furthermore, if they are not sustainable in the production, then it's not very convenient for them to be used, unless the benefit that we are going to get overcomes or is able to counteract the less sustainable production thereof. But of course, with today's and with the scarcity of resources, of natural resources that we are facing, if we don't take a sustainable production into account, then we are not being responsible from the social point of view. And this is a very important aspect. Yes, and thank you for well, I think I had it, the quality and the sustainability. I think I had it in the technology slide. I think I mentioned, but once that, it's very important to reinforce that aspect. Sustainability has to come now hand in hand with quality, safety, with added value. Yes.
Yes, it's also a question of standards of production. So I can only talk about Austria with sustainability, quality. This is all questions of standardized productions, of
Yes,
certified production lines. So it's absolutely a current issue, an actual issue, and also interesting for the future. There's no doubt.
very, very, yes. And it's within the 2030 perspective, all
Mm,
the agendas, all the food and agricultural agendas have sustainability as an important
yes,
issue to take into account,
yes,
undoubtedly.
as an aspect, yes. So we have another question from Pedro Vargas. He says, "Thank you for the presentation. Do you have any information about the blue zones? This means people who live more than 100 years in Italy, Greece, Japan, etc., and the food they eat."
Yes, well, there has been a project. I cannot share. Well, thank you for the question, Pedro. I'm not familiar with the results, but I know that there has been an ongoing project making a very interesting and objective overview of what these people eat, including in Portugal. We have a team from the University of Porto looking at people over their hundreds and looking at, well, not only eating habits. In fact, they were looking at many other aspects within the lifestyle, and the eating habits were less considered. But in collaboration with a colleague of ours, they are now looking into these data, and it's quite interesting to look at some of the dietary habits, but not always are they correlative. Are they is not always is it able to are we able to establish a correlation between the eating habits and the longevity. There are other factors that are also there are also social factors, economic factors, cultural factors that are also or that also have to be taken into account. But some very interesting studies have been performed. As I mentioned, and I'm sorry, I do not have present all the results, but you can look
Mhm.
in literature. There was a very interesting study with Japan, and there has been now a more recent study in Portugal.
Mhm. So I have one more question from Janet Bacalars. She's asking, what about high fructose corn syrup? Is it more unhealthy than other sugar forms? Should it not be prohibited?
Well, once again, Janet, thank you for the question. But at the moment, I do not have enough information on my side to answer your question. So
Mhm.
once again, I do not want to reply without being sure of what I am saying.
Mm.
So I'm sorry, Janet. I would have to look. I can look into this question and I can get back to you. You can send me an email. But at the moment, I'm not in a condition to reply.
Okay, there's another question just coming in. Thank you for your presentation, says Eileen Klaus. My question is related to the synthetic additive-free foods or free from synthetic additives.
Mhm.
Which synthetic additives did you refer to?
Okay, thank you, Helene, for your question. Well, I have to make a parenthesis because when we look at additives and those that are available on the market, of course, we know that they have been put through a very thorough and profound analysis by our colleagues in the NDA teams or in the EFSA teams
Mm,
that do a very profound safety risk analysis, and they do this on a regular basis. So if we are familiar with how additives are what's I'm missing the word, I'm sorry. when they are approved, right, for use in food. If we are familiar with the process, we know that it is a very strict process. We know that it is based on a huge amount of information. Scientific opinions are published. There is a regular visiting of all the incoming new information considering safety or risk analysis. So, of course, we know that some of these additives are really important inclusively. They have a technological role to play. They actually become part of the structure of food, and without their presence, it's more difficult to have a successful story from the product development point of view. When we look now at consumers, from the consumer's point of view, right? Consumers are, because they have been bombarded, I think that's the word, with so many information. Of course, we know that most of this information is not scientifically based, but the consumer does not always know how to filter this information. And because of this type of secondary information constantly coming out, consumer and because the consumer is very aware of safety issues, and because they know, or they associate it. When we look into consumer science, the word natural is associated with positiveness. The word synthetic is associated with negativeness. So we have to take this into account. So here we have to really look at this term from both aspects. So when we know what is behind the additive approval, we can consider these compounds safe. Of course, we also know that there are many limiting issues when as far as this is concerned, because when we are looking at an additive to approve its placement on the market, we are looking at one compound, and we are not looking at the compound within the matrix interacting with the other ingredients. So this aspect, as I was talking, or as I was covering it in my talk. So this is let's say, a limiting aspect. This is a hurdle. We approve an additive, but we have not looked at all of the situations where the additive can be used. But if we look at natural compounds, okay, so now we are going to substitute an antimicrobial, a nitrate, with an essential oil for the antimicrobial, so as a preservative, right? And the essential oil is a natural product, and our nitrate is a synthetic additive. But will that essential oil interact with a compound and not have its, or will it be degraded, and such metabolites, such compound, even be more toxic than the nitrate itself? I don't know if I'm making sense. So this is a very once again, it's a very complex issue. But we have this synthetic versus natural from the consumer point of view. So the consumer wants a clean label, and when we look at trends, no matter what database, or no matter what institute that is looking into food drivers or food development trends, the clean label comes through as a very important aspect. And when we are talking about clean label, then we have to remove those synthetic additives, and we have to replace them. So even looking at sweeteners, sugar substitutes, sugar replacers. Instead of having an aspartame, or instead of having a aspartame, we can have a stevia, for example. So this is what we are looking at the moment from the consumer perception point of view.
Yes, thank you, Anna. It's a very complex issue. Everything that has to do with nutrition has to be looked at in many different relations. It's about how additives are working in food. It's about how additives are being metabolized, and what is happening to them during storage. There's so many factors influencing it that it's just, hard enough to look at it from one approach and to have an overview from this many aspects is just
yes, yes,
very hard to do. Just very hard to
yes.
do.
What I was saying for the bioactives and for the nutrients applies for the additives because we have to look during the production, during storage, during preparation, and during consumption.
Yes, and technological requests and recommendations are, yes, not really the same as you need for nutritional issues, and there are
Yes,
conflicting interests.
yes.
Well, it's
Mm-hmm.
really a wide field.
A very wide field, a very interesting field, I must say,
And
but
very interesting. Yes, this is where we are
but
working, why we are working with it.
exactly.
So I may thank you very much, Anna, for your lecture and for the questions, for the answers to the question. Okay, there's from Janet Bakalas another input. She says, there is a trending technology, RNA interference or gene silencing. The first product was the Flavor Saver tomato, which was not successful on the market. More recently, there is a non-browning apple in Australia. Will such technologies have in the near future, will we them have in Europe? Or will GMOs for direct human consumption stay a no-go within the EU? Well, that's a political question, and as far as Austria is concerned, I'm sure that there are many people saying absolutely no to this
Yes.
possibility, and don't know what is your experience with it, Anna?
Well, it's the same situation here in Portugal. Undoubtedly, this is a political issue, and undoubtedly, this is a policy aspect that has to be. But I think for the moment, within the European Union, I don't foresee great alterations within
No.
the place or the standpoint that
Yeah.
the European Union and that the members of
Mm.
Parliament um, have undertaken. So,
Yes, I
of
think
course,
they're not in favor of
might be
GMO.
interesting.
Yes.
Once again, it might be it's very interesting from as solutions for nutritional deficiencies, for food
Mm.
availability, for food security. But well, when there is not sufficient information to make things clear, then the precautionary principle is put in place. And so I think,
Absolutely.
yes.
Mm. So this seems to have been really the last question. Thank you
Okay.
again, Anna. Very
Thank you.
interesting lecture, very interesting answers to the also very yes,
Interesting.
interesting question from the attendees. It was
Yes.
really great to have you here this afternoon.
Well, it was a pleasure for me as well, Christine, and thank you to all the attendees. Thank you to you, Christine, for the introduction, and you said it very well, I must say, my institute. So thank you.
So thank you very much too. I may
Yes,
uh, draw your attention just for 1 second to the project website of Foodstar. It's at food-star.eu, and you can find the material of this webinar and all other webinars that have already taken place under the button Events, and there is the point, the topic Webinars, and all webinars that have already been held, and the today's webinar then too, are there with recordings and the presentation material available. The calendar for autumn is not yet published, but we will continue with the webinars in September and October, and we are looking forward to seeing many of you again. Thank you for your attention and have a nice evening. Bye, Anna.
bye-bye. Have a nice evening to all. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.